Looking back, my childhood felt like an intricate puzzle where some pieces just didn't fit. My mother, Diana, often described me as a mistake, a cruel nickname she used with such casual indifference that it became a part of my identity. From as early as I could remember, she openly favored my sister, Lauren. While Lauren basked in the warmth of Diana's affection, I stood on the sidelines, watching their bond deepen in ways I could never reach. Lauren's birthdays were extravagant affairs, colorful decorations, themed cakes, and crowds of friends filling the house with laughter. My birthdays, on the other hand, were footnotes in our family calendar. I would get a card if Diana remembered, but even then, her signature felt cold and perfunctory. Christmases followed the same pattern. Lauren's gifts sparkled with thoughtfulness, while mine were little more than afterthoughts. My father, Andrew, was a stark contrast to Diana. Though he didn't live with us, he was steady, like an anchor in a storm. Andrew's visits were my lifeline. He'd take me out for ice cream, listen attentively to my endless stories, and remind me I wasn't invisible. Yet his relationship with Diana was as fractured as mine. They couldn't stand to be in the same room, and their arguments often spilled over into my visits. Andrew's love felt like a patch on a sinking ship, and when he left, the walls of Diana's cold indifference closed in again. Everything shifted when Michael entered the picture. He was Diana's second chance at love, and he embraced the role of stepfather with enthusiasm. He'd ask about my day, encourage my interests, and sometimes even defend me when Diana's criticism became too sharp. But his efforts, no matter how genuine, couldn't undo years of neglect. The gap between Lauren and me was too wide, and Diana's favoritism remained unshaken. Lauren was the golden child in every sense. She excelled in school, participated in sports, and was the pride of Diana's life. Meanwhile, I faded further into the background. Diana's disapproval seemed to follow me like a shadow, her voice constantly reminding me of my shortcomings. When Lauren was praised for her accomplishments, I was criticized for not matching her success. Diana's words were needles, stitching together a tapestry of inadequacy that wrapped tightly around me. By the time I left for college, the rift between my mother and me had become a chasm. Diana barely acknowledged my departure, offering a dismissive farewell as if I were a guest overstaying my welcome. College became my sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without her judgment suffocating me. But it also solidified her absence. Months would pass without a single call or text from her, and when we did speak, the conversations were strained and perfunctory. Michael would occasionally reach out, his voice filled with awkward concern, but even his efforts dwindled over time. Lauren's life, meanwhile, continued to be the center of Diana's universe. She'd call regularly, visit on weekends, and share updates that Diana would gush about to anyone who'd listen. The contrast couldn't have been starker. While Lauren was celebrated, I became a ghost in my own family, a memory too inconvenient to acknowledge. Despite the pain, the distance offered clarity. I began to see Diana's treatment for what it was, a reflection of her own struggles, not mine. But understanding didn't make the hurt disappear. The scars of her words and actions were etched deep, and as much as I tried to move forward, the past lingered like an unwelcome guest. Even as I carved out a life for myself, the echoes of Diana's disapproval remained, reminding me that no matter how far I ran, some pieces of the puzzle would always be missing. In college, my world started to open up in ways I never thought possible. Amidst the whirlwind of lectures, new friends, and endless nights of studying, I met Adam. He was everything I had longed for, attentive, kind, and genuinely interested in who I was beyond my family's dysfunction. With Adam, I felt seen in a way that no one had ever managed before. He asked about my childhood, listened without judgment, and offered comfort in moments when the weight of my past felt unbearable. For the first time, I felt like I mattered. Our relationship became a lifeline, anchoring me through the turbulence of my college years. Adam's unwavering support contrasted sharply with the indifference I had grown used to. He encouraged me to pursue my passions, cheered me on through challenges, and even helped me see myself in a more positive light. It was as if he were trying to patch up the cracks left by years of neglect, piece by piece. When graduation approached, I hoped the milestone would mark a turning point, not just for me, but for my family's perception of my achievements. Michael insisted that Diana attend, though her reluctance was palpable. She arrived late, wearing a strained smile that barely masked her disinterest. Standing beside Michael, she looked out of place, as if she'd rather be anywhere else. After the ceremony, Adam met my family for the first time. His easy charm put Michael at ease, but Diana's reaction was something else entirely. Her polite facade cracked just enough for me to notice. She scrutinized Adam with a sharpness that left me unsettled, and her comments were laced with subtle insults disguised as observations. She questioned how someone like Adam could see anything special in me, remarking on my appearance and how I'd lucked out finding someone so presentable. The sting of her words was familiar, but this time it was mixed with something new. For the first time, I noticed her interest in Adam was oddly personal. She lingered in conversations with him, steering topics toward herself, and laughed just a little too much at his jokes. At first, I dismissed it as overthinking. Diana had always found ways to make me feel small, and I assumed this was just another tactic. But after graduation, things took a stranger turn. Diana started following Adam on social media. She'd comment on his posts, liking his photos with an enthusiasm that felt out of character. Her messages to him, which he casually mentioned, were innocuous on the surface, but seemed unnecessary. It felt like she was inserting herself into my relationship in a way that made me uneasy. I tried to ignore it, chalking up my discomfort to paranoia. Adam reassured me that it was harmless, that she was just trying to be friendly. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't go away. It was as if Diana had found a new way to remind me of her presence, her ability to overshadow even the most personal parts of my life. Our relationship began to strain under the weight of these unspoken tensions. Adam's ambitions and mine started to diverge. He wanted to move to a big city and chase opportunities that excited him, while I was drawn to quieter places, away from the chaos of my past. The distance between us grew, and eventually we parted ways. It was a mutual decision, but it left a void that felt bigger than just the end of a relationship. Even after we broke up, the lingering suspicion about Diana's involvement gnawed at me. Her messages to Adam didn't stop immediately, and the memory of her behavior during graduation haunted me. It wasn't just the loss of Adam that hurt. It was the realization that Diana's shadow still loomed over my life, shaping my relationships in ways I couldn't fully understand. The unresolved questions about her motives became yet another piece of my past I couldn't seem to leave behind. 2 years after the painful breakup with Adam, my life took an unexpected but welcome turn. That was when Alex entered the picture. From our first meeting, he exuded a warmth and stability that drew me in. Unlike anyone I had met before, he didn't just listen to my past. He wanted to be part of my future. With Alex, I felt safe, truly safe for the first time in my life. Together, we began building dreams of a future that didn't carry the weight of my family's dysfunction. Alex's calm demeanor and unwavering support were like a balm for my frayed nerves. He celebrated my small victories and patiently helped me through my insecurities, even the ones I hadn't fully acknowledged. Our relationship moved quickly, but it never felt rushed. When I found out I was pregnant, it felt like everything had finally fallen into place. Alex proposed soon after, and we planned a small, intimate wedding that would mark the beginning of our new chapter. For the first time in years, I was genuinely happy. But as always, Diana's shadow lingered, casting a chill over my joy. Her reaction to the pregnancy was lukewarm at best. She made it clear that she thought I had settled, referring to Alex as adequate in a tone that left no doubt about her disapproval. She questioned his career choices, his family background, and even his ability to be a father. Each comment felt like a calculated jab, designed to puncture the bubble of happiness I had worked so hard to create. The wedding was no different. Diana's presence was more an obligation than a gesture of support. She spent most of the day making snide remarks thinly veiled as advice. She even had the audacity to mention Adam during the reception, casually suggesting that he had been a better match for me. Her words hit me like a slap, stirring up memories I had worked so hard to bury. But it was her tone, that familiar mix of disdain and condescension, that truly ignited my anger. When I confronted her, she brushed it off as joking and accused me of overreacting. But her next statement left me speechless. She hinted that she had stayed in touch with Adam, claiming it was purely out of courtesy. The implication was clear. She saw him as a better option for me, and she wasn't ready to let go of that idea. My stomach churned at the thought of her meddling in my life in such a deliberate way. That conversation was a turning point. I told Diana, in no uncertain terms, that she would no longer have the power to dictate my life. Her response was a scoff, a dismissive wave of her hand that spoke volumes. To her, my defiance was a phase, a temporary rebellion that she could outlast. But I knew better. This wasn't rebellion, it was survival. Alex was my anchor through it all. He reminded me that Diana's opinions didn't define us, that our life was ours to build. Still, her presence loomed large, a reminder of the battles I thought I had left behind. As much as I wanted to shut her out completely, the strings of our shared history were hard to sever. She was my mother, after all, and part of me still hoped for a version of her that didn't exist. As the pregnancy progressed, Diana's attempts to insert herself into our lives became more frequent and more calculated. She'd call at odd hours, offering unsolicited advice about everything from baby names to parenting styles. Her criticism of Alex grew sharper, her disapproval more vocal. It was as if my happiness was a challenge she couldn't ignore, a puzzle she was determined to dismantle. I realized then that my battle with Diana wasn't just about her behavior, it was about reclaiming my own narrative. For too long, I had let her define me, her words, her actions, her judgments shaping how I saw myself. But with Alex by my side and a child on the way, I finally understood that my life was mine to write. Diana's influence might still linger, but it no longer held the power it once did. The future, for the first time, felt like it belonged to me. The baby shower was meant to be a celebration, a joyful gathering of loved ones to welcome the new chapter in my life. Lauren, ever the perfectionist, had gone above and beyond in planning the event. The decorations were elegant but warm, the food delicious, and the guest list filled with close friends and family who truly cared. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that this day would be free from the chaos that usually accompanied my interactions with Diana. Diana arrived late, as she often did, her presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. She seemed tense, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for something or someone. Her behavior was odd, even for her, but I chose to ignore it, focusing instead on the warmth of the occasion. Alex was by my side, his hand resting reassuringly on my back, and for a while, I felt shielded from whatever storm Diana might bring. As the event unfolded, Lauren stood to make a toast, her words heartfelt and touching. Just as I began to relax, Diana interrupted, her voice cutting through the moment like a blade. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried hidden intentions. She announced she had a surprise for everyone, her tone dripping with something I couldn't quite place. Before anyone could react, she motioned toward the door, and in walked Adam. The room fell silent, the air thick with confusion and tension. Adam's presence was a shock, a ghost from a past I had worked hard to move beyond. He looked uncomfortable but determined, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me. My heart raced, a mix of anger, embarrassment, and disbelief flooding my senses. Diana, meanwhile, looked almost smug, as if she'd orchestrated the perfect move in some twisted game. Adam's voice broke the silence, his words measured, but pointed. He revealed that Diana had been in regular contact with him for months, her messages filled with attempts to convince him that Alex wasn't right for me. She'd painted a picture of my life that was far from reality, framing herself as a concerned mother trying to fix my supposed mistakes. His tone shifted, growing sharper as he described how relentless she had been, crossing boundaries in ways that left even him uncomfortable. The room was frozen, all eyes shifting between Diana and Adam as the weight of his words sank in. Diana tried to interject, her voice shrill and defensive, but Adam didn't waver. He laid everything bare, exposing the depth of her manipulation with a clarity that left no room for doubt. He wasn't just calling her out, he was tearing down the facade she had worked so hard to maintain. For a moment, all I could feel was the heat of humiliation. My mother's actions were laid bare in front of everyone I cared about, her toxic grip on my life exposed for all to see. But then something shifted. The anger that had simmered within me for years finally boiled over, transforming into a clarity I hadn't experienced before. This wasn't just another one of Diana's stunts, it was a breaking point. I stood, my voice steady but firm, addressing Diana directly. I acknowledged the pain she had caused, the countless ways she had tried to undermine my happiness, and the toxic patterns that had defined our relationship. But I also made it clear that I was done. Done letting her control my narrative, done excusing her behavior, and done allowing her to have any power over my life. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was a silence filled with resolution. Diana's face was a mix of shock and anger, her usual composure shattered. She tried to defend herself, to twist the narrative in her favor, but no one in the room was buying it. Even Lauren, who had often been spared Diana's venom, looked appalled by what she had witnessed. As the event wound down, the weight of what had happened began to settle. Adam left quietly, his presence no longer needed, and the guests slowly trickled out, offering words of support and encouragement. Alex stayed close, his unwavering presence a reminder that I wasn't alone in this. That night, as I sat in the quiet of our home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. The pain of severing ties with Diana was real, but so was the relief. For the first time, I felt free to build a life that wasn't overshadowed by her toxicity. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be mine to walk, unburdened by the weight of her expectations. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could give to myself and my growing family. Months after the chaos of the baby shower, my life transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The moment I held my newborn in my arms, the world seemed to shift. All the pain and turmoil of my past felt distant, overshadowed by the tiny, perfect life I had brought into the world. Alex stood by my side, his face radiating pride and love. In that instant, I knew we had built something unshakable, something Diana could never taint. Our circle had grown smaller, but infinitely stronger. Alex, Lauren, Michael, and my father Andrew were constants, their support a fortress around me. Lauren, once the golden child, had become my fiercest ally. She'd seen the depths of Diana's toxicity at the baby shower and had made the decision to step away as well. It was a surprising but welcome turn. For the first time, it felt like Lauren and I were truly sisters, united against a common force that had overshadowed us for too long. Diana, predictably, couldn't let go. Her attempts to reinsert herself into my life came in waves of manipulative messages. She dismissed her actions as misunderstandings, claiming I'd overreacted due to hormonal swings from pregnancy. The messages swung wildly between guilt trips, self-pity, and thinly veiled barbs about my decisions. I'd read them with a strange mix of anger and pity, but I never responded. Each ignored message felt like reclaiming a piece of myself she had taken. Michael's departure from Diana's life was perhaps the most shocking fallout. For years, he had tried to be the buffer between Diana and the rest of us, excusing her behavior as just her way of showing love. But the baby shower had shattered that illusion. Seeing her manipulations laid bare was a wake-up call he couldn't ignore. When he finally left her, he called me to explain, his voice heavy with regret. He apologized for not seeing the damage sooner, for not protecting me and Lauren the way he should have. It was a bittersweet moment, a reminder that even those who mean well can be blind to the harm they enable. Lauren's decision to cut ties with Diana came quietly but decisively. She didn't make a grand statement or seek validation. She simply stopped responding to Diana's attempts at contact. Instead, she poured her energy into strengthening our relationship. We began to share stories, filling in the gaps of each other's lives that Diana had once kept us from exploring. The bond we forged was one of the few bright lights to emerge from the darkness of our shared past. Andrew, ever the steady presence, became a grandfather with the same quiet dedication he'd shown me as a child. Watching him hold my baby was like seeing a part of my own childhood redeemed. He'd missed so much when I was growing up, sidelined by Diana's bitterness, but now he was here, fully present, and it meant the world to me. Life settled into a rhythm, one that felt blissfully ordinary. Alex and I navigated the sleepless nights and endless diapers with a sense of teamwork that deepened our bond. Our home was filled with laughter and warmth, a stark contrast to the cold, tension-filled environment I'd grown up in. Each day felt like a step further away from the shadows of my past and closer to the life I'd always dreamed of. One evening, as I rocked my baby to sleep, a sense of peace washed over me. The silence of the house was comforting, not oppressive. Alex was in the next room, humming softly as he tidied up, and I could hear Lauren's voice on a video call with Michael, their laughter carrying through the walls. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Diana's absence was a void, yes, but it was a void that had been filled with something far more meaningful. Her influence had once loomed so large, dictating my every move, but now it was a distant echo, powerless to disrupt the life I had built. Her messages still came occasionally, each one a reminder of the person she'd chosen to be. But they no longer held any sway over me. I'd learned to let them go, to let her go. As I looked down at my sleeping baby, a profound realization took hold. My strength didn't come from enduring Diana's toxicity. It came from choosing to rise above it. My family was no longer defined by her actions but by the love and resilience we had built in spite of them. The future stretched out before me, bright and full of promise, and I knew, with unshakable certainty, that it was mine to shape. This was my life, my family, and my happiness. And for the first time, it felt entirely beautifully enough.